to a Hope 1032 podcast.
Hello everyone, it's so good to be back with you. Welcome to Season 6 of Raising Teens. I'm your host, Collett Smart. I'm a psychologist, a teacher, and also a parent in the middle of raising my own teen and young adult children. I started this podcast because I know that many teens are struggling, and I wanted to create an online village of support for parents. I'm joined again this season by well-known experts on teen mental health and well-being. I have such hope for this generation of young people, so each episode is jam-packed with support so that you can get on with the job that you do best. That is, connecting with and loving your teen. My guest today is one of Australia's leading voices in managing anxiety. Dr Jodi Richardson supports parents and teachers to change their relationship with anxiety, dial it right down, and light the way for their children and students to do the same. Jodi is a professional speaker supporting whole school communities around Australia. She's the co-author of the best-selling book Anxious Kids and author of Anxious Mums. She hosts her own podcast, Well, Hello, Anxiety, and she is mum of 2 children. Hello, Jodi. Thank you so much for joining us on Raising Teens.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be with you.
So, Jodi, you and I have shared the stage at a number of the Resilience Kids conferences, and what I always notice is you have this incredibly long line of parents at the end of your talks interested in your books. It says a lot to me about parents and families and their need to understand this topic of anxiety. And so today I thought we're going to focus on anxiety or anxious parents rather than the teenagers. So Jodi, I'm doing some more postgraduate study, and I've been looking at the recent data on anxiety. Anxiety is still the most commonly diagnosed mental health condition, with women and girls being more likely to receive a diagnosis of anxiety than boys and men. But I've spoken on the podcast quite recently to Dr. Zach Seidler, and he says he thinks some of the data isn't a good representation of boys and men, especially when we look at the devastating rates of suicide. So, Jodi, would you talk us through a little bit about what we know about anxiety in adults?
Yes, well, you're exactly right about the statistics, and they're quite frightening when we look at 1 in 3 women being diagnosed with an anxiety disorder in their lifetime, 1 in 5 men. But I do agree with Dr. Seidler's conclusion around that, given, like you're explaining about the suicide rates, that as adults, as women, we tend to be more open to talking about our challenges and talking about our struggles. Especially the older we get, I think that we find those beautiful connections amongst our friends, that it gives us that comfortability and that opportunity to be vulnerable and share more about how we're going. And that help-seeking behaviour can often be far more prevalent in women as well. So there's likely an underrepresentation there. But we certainly know that it's a huge challenge for the population. Even now, as I do presentations about raising children who are anxious and supporting them, and really supporting them with really practical strategies and help parents understand what's at the heart of the anxiety, what to look for, what to do, I frequently have parents approach me afterwards saying, "You've just spent the last 90 minutes talking about me and my life." They can relate to my own story that I share. And so these adults in their 40s and 50s are recognising this anxiety in themselves for the very first time when seeking help for their children. So there's still so much to do in terms of helping people to really understand it and to really recognise it in themselves and get their help, get the help they need, and also then obviously be able to support the young people in their lives as well.
We know more about anxiety today than we did 20 or 30 years ago. And one of the things we've realized is that there is a genetic factor to mental ill health. Not in all, but in many cases, a parent may suddenly recognize themselves or a family member when a child is diagnosed with anxiety. I've also spoken to young people who, upon learning about their own diagnosis, recognize some of the symptoms in their parents, yet their parents seem to dismiss or downplay it, saying, "Oh, it happens to everyone." This can often be because when they were growing up, the only option was to suppress it and hope it just went away on its own. I think, Jodi, it's so natural for parents to worry about their teens. We want to protect our children. We want to protect them when things are tough, when there's friendship changes or end-of-year exams, big emotions and so on. And our teens want to be independent. But can you explain for us normal anxiety or normal stress about our teens compared to, say, an anxiety disorder?
We are really well equipped to cope with stress from a physiological point of view when there's a stress. So I'm really comfortable doing this. I love talking about this and especially reconnecting with you. So this isn't stressful for me. But in this experience of being recorded and having this conversation that will be public, this would be a stressful experience. And so the body will mobilize resources and energy and attention to really help a person cope with a stress, knowing that typically a stress rises, then the stress should fall away once the podcast recording is finished, and then we can return to some sort of a more neutral state with our nervous system and with our physiology. So we're really well equipped for that. So we don't have to rid ourselves of stress. But when it comes to anxiety, it's this response in anticipation of a threat. And so in the lead up to a stressful event, we can experience this anticipatory kind of change in our physiology. Our heart rate changes, our breathing changes. The brain has detected a threat that's upcoming and is preparing us to cope with that. Those of us who live with an anxiety disorder, it can be really frequent, extreme, getting in the way of doing normal daily functions and events and participating in life, and that's when it becomes a problem.
So, Jodi, if someone's listening and they're wondering about an anxiety disorder, what might they be looking for in themselves?
It can affect us in 4 key ways. So in recognising anxiety, I like to help people think about it from 4 different perspectives. So one is it will affect the way we think. So there can be lots of worries, lots of what ifs, lots of that anticipation about things going wrong, catastrophic thinking, worst case scenario. We can also feel very emotional. So it'll affect how we feel in terms of our emotional state. So for me, I can feel really teary and really emotional. Some will feel very agitated, very affronted, quite angry, can be the fight side of the fight or flight response. One huge part of anxiety that's often not given the spotlight is the way it affects how we feel from a physiological point of view in our body. Next time you're feeling anxious, I'll give you an example. Today, I was driving home from the school drop-off and a person was driving so close to my bumper. I don't know if she was not paying attention and just driving a bit close. Perhaps she was trying to hurry me up. My brain detected that as a threat straight away. She was so close, I couldn't even see her number plate. And I immediately noticed my heart rate go up. And I immediately noticed this change in my breathing, because when our physiology changes to prepare us for a fight or to flee a threat, then we need to be powered up physiologically to be able to respond and keep ourselves safe. So from a physical point of view, racing heart, changes to our breathing to bring in more oxygen. We can feel sick and have gut sensations that are uncomfortable because blood's being moved from our gut to our arms and legs to prepare us to fight or flee. And it's important to point out that when our brain detects a threat, even though my safety was not really probably under threat, when a threat is detected, the brain doesn't really differentiate between something that's really going to put your life at risk and something that might be an inconvenience. We can sweat a lot because our brain is expecting our body to really work hard to run or to fight. We can get tingly in our arms and legs. We can get trembly. We can have spots in our vision. We can experience a lot of tension because our muscles are preparing for action. So these physical sensations are really prevalent. And last of all, when it comes to recognizing anxiety, it's important to look at behaviors, not from a point of view of poor behavior, just what do you observe? What actions do you want to do or don't want to do? And it's often related to avoidance.
Yeah.
So recognition, I think when you can sort of even draw a cross on a piece of paper like a hot cross bun and fill in those boxes of what you're observing, it really helps to paint a picture of what anxiety looks like for you or someone you care about.
I'm so glad you brought up the agitation, and also I notice things like explosive anger sometimes, or, angry responses. And that is something we often see in boys and men, not because it's I'm being stereotypical. It seems to be still in society the only acceptable way still for many boys and men to express their emotion is through anger or irritability. So you may not see your husband or your male partner crying or sobbing in the corner. They may not be teary, but their agitation. So I'm really glad you pointed that out. And Jodi, I think we've all found the pandemic difficult for various reasons. I actually read some research recently that said we are likely still to see the repercussions of lockdowns 2 years after the lockdowns ended. So we've still got, it's not that now we're out of lockdown, we're all good. It's okay for our listeners to still be struggling, because the research says our body did experience fight or flight, like you highlighted. Have you seen changes in patterns yourself, in your talks and being out with people and those that you talk to? What are things you've noticed since we've come out of lockdown?
Some of the things I've noticed really relate to friendships and social skills, and the challenges in coping with the emotional upheaval that comes with being a teenager or a tween, and really trying to manage those ups and downs, having had 2 years where the social skills were not being finessed in ways that they would have if we were all in person over that period of time. And a huge challenge that I'm seeing is that there is a refusal among many young people to return to activities and to routines that were once very much a part of life and unquestioned, particularly school.
Okay.
School refusal is a big challenge for families. And one of the challenges that I know a lot of families are really struggling with is just this real unwillingness of people to reach out and to connect with the help that would make such a difference for them.
Oftentimes, as a parent or a carer, showing any signs of vulnerability can feel scary, or as if you failed somehow. There's nothing wrong with seeing a psychologist. Last year, I developed tennis elbow, and I really needed the help from a physio and my GP to get it sorted out. I had to stop just pushing through the pain, and it didn't improve overnight. It actually took months of exercise and support to get it strong again. But I did it. We know that sticking on a Band-Aid or using temporary solutions for physical ailments just won't work. So why do we use unhealthy coping mechanisms, temporary solutions, or just pretend we're okay when it comes to mental health?
We were faced with so much uncertainty, which is a huge driver of anxiety. And we know when there is uncertainty, people with anxiety engage in a lot of safety behaviours to try to minimise the uncertainty and develop more control. The pandemic, not only did it create uncertainty about the risk to our safety through the virus, we were really trained to stay away from people who normally are our biggest source of comfort and connection, and help build our resilience and boost our happiness. It really perpetuated that avoidance that comes with anxiety, and it stopped all of us from doing the things that are really protective, like our sport and again, being with people. So it's really understandable that the knock-on effects, the fallout from the pandemic are being seen now and will continue to be seen for some. But for others, being back in routine, back at sport, back with friends, back at school has really made a really powerful difference. And those young people whose mental health was suffering are doing a lot better. So there is some good news as well.
Yeah, that's great. So, Jodi, how does our anxiety affect our children? So obviously you and I don't want to add guilt, but we know that there's a contagious nature to anxiety. Can you chat with us about what that looks like and then what to do about it?
I can. And I agree with what you just said as part of your question, is that one of the things when it comes to parenting is it's really, really hard. It's really hard, and we can't be cool, calm and collected and responsive all the time. Sometimes we react. Sometimes we bring our stresses home. I know my stress and anxiety is very palpable sometimes in my home with my kids who are 12 and 14. And what I love to say to parents is that loving, well-meaning, beautiful parents are human, and we don't get it right all the time. We can't. But when we get it not so much wrong, but when we don't respond or parent in ways that we would like to have, it's an opportunity for us to go back and unpack it with our kids, and it's a learning opportunity, I think, for them as well. So that being said, it is true that anxiety is contagious, and when we're feeling stressed, anxious, it will show in our families in a number of ways. Our children can pick up on changes in our voice because of the way the vagus nerve connects through to our vocal cords. And so when we're calm and relaxed, the prosody of our voice is different. We're more melodic. We know that, we can feel tighter in the throat when we're feeling very stressed and wound up. So our kids can pick it up from the way we speak, what we say, and just generally, just sometimes we just might go, oh, like that, and it's evident. So all of these little cues can be picked up by our children that we're not feeling particularly calm, and what it can do is it can raise their anxiety as well. And so, that hence the contagious nature of it. And equally, it can go in the other direction. And so I think we're all familiar with the faces we might see on our kids if we're picking them up from school and we can see that they've had a terrible day, and immediately we brace for what's to come. And so when our kids are stressed and anxious, we'll feel it too. And it's worth, first of all, having an understanding that this is something that happens. And it's meant to really, I guess, prepare us to feel what our kids are feeling and to be affected by that so that we're moved to respond. Equally, as our stress and anxiety are contagious, so is our calm. And it requires self-regulation from us as parents when our kids are very stressed and anxious. If we can ground ourselves, watch our breathing, really extend our exhale, and just be mindful of how we are in that moment, it can help us to be more able to listen and respond appropriately. One of the things that I think is helpful to know too is that there are transitions during the day for us as parents whereby for me, for example, I'm home today working, and there'll be a transition between me being at home alone working, where I only have to worry about what I'm doing, and my border collie who hangs around with me. And then I'm transitioning back into that parent role through the drive to pick them up. And so that's a transition moment for me to be able to go, right, well, what was stressing me about the day? What can I do to focus on what I can and can't control? And how can I show up for my kids in a way that's going to be really relaxed, hopefully relaxed, and give them a lovely warm greeting and really connect. So if we can be mindful of those transition periods and use those wisely, can give us an opportunity to sort of reflect, reset, and then kind of show up the way that we want to. Not always possible. Sometimes what hits the fan in the middle of a family moment, and we'll react, and if we do behave in a way that we prefer we didn't, then we can come back later and say, look, you know what, I've got a lot going on. This happened, or, there was a stressful experience for me. That spilled over into the way I spoke to you. I really am sorry that I spoke to you in that way. I apologize for raising my voice or for, being short. And I just want to let you know that actually that wasn't about you. That was about something else. And we've got an opportunity to repair the relationship in those circumstances as well.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in apologising, modelling apologies to our kids. Jodi, I just want to go back a bit. You spoke about the vagus nerve. Steve Biddulph's been on the podcast before, and he's spoken about the vagus nerve. Would you like to just give us a quick snapshot of what that is for listeners who aren't familiar with the term vagus nerve?
Yes, I can. I'd love to. So it's a pair of nerves, 10th cranial nerve, so coming from sort of the base of the skull and then weaving their way down through past our heart and our lungs into our gut. And we also have parts of the vagus nerve that reach through to our voice box and to our face. And it's so interesting because 80% of the messages from the vagus nerve travel from the gut and the body to the brain. So the vagus nerve sends a lot of information to our brain about the state of our body. And it's really the nerve that we can thank for this beautiful mind body connection, that the brain and the body are not separate. 20% go in the other direction. When we are experiencing a stress, we have what's called the vagal brake, if you like. And when we're needing to mobilize by bringing more blood around the body, more oxygenated blood to our arms and our legs and to our muscles to move under stress or to cope, then the vagal brake releases a little bit and enables us to respond. And when the stress passes, the vagal brake reapplies and the heart rate starts to slow and we start to settle back into a more neutral parasympathetic activated nervous system, which is sort of that cool, calm, collected. So the vagal brake enables us to kind of go into that mobilizing fight or flight, respond accordingly, and then settle back down. When we are very stressed over a prolonged period of time, you can see it on somebody's face. When somebody's been experiencing a lot of prolonged stress or grief or challenge in their life, you can often see it. That's that part of the vagus nerve as well. And so it's so fascinating the way that it operates in terms of our stress and our anxiety and just the way that our nervous systems respond to the challenges that we face day in and day out.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Steve Biddulph refers to the vagus nerve as being part of your super sense. So, yeah, it's just there's so much interesting research and information coming out about that aspect of us as human beings. Also, Jodi, now coming back to us as parents and how we've spoken about apologizing to our children. And, if we struggle with our own anxiety ourselves, it's important for us to model that calm and model some of our own strategies for managing our own anxiety, but also without oversharing. So it's not our teens' responsibility to help us be calm or be our confidant or our counselor. We actually need other adults in our lives. But there's this balance between not pretending everything is happening perfectly for you and you have everything under control and not oversharing your fears, but also then sharing appropriately with your teenagers. Do you have some thoughts on the best ways to deal with our anxieties and share with our children, but then also teaching our children that all emotions are okay and appropriate?
Yes, it's coping out loud, I think, is a really beautiful phrase that comes from the wonderful Dr. Chris McCurry, who's a child and adolescent psychologist, retired, unfortunately, but a writer and author and still an expert who lends his voice in this space. So you're exactly right. It's that balance, isn't it? By role modeling that all emotions are okay and we can experience, it's important for us all to experience how we feel, but also not oversharing, like you say, so that our kids then end up experiencing that vicarious kind of challenge themselves and feeling like they need to be the one to help support us. So it's a line that we walk, I think. And one of the things that I personally do here at home is the idea of coping out loud. And I'll share an example with you. My beautiful nan passed away a number of years ago, and that was a very distressing time for me to experience that loss. And the children would have been around 11 and 8 or thereabouts. And I expressed my grief through tears. That was an appropriate thing for me to do because that was how I was feeling. And in that moment, I was able to say that I'm feeling really sad right now. This is, I really going to miss my nan and that this is a difficult time for me. I know it's hard to see me feeling upset, but it's important that I'm able to express my emotions and that this is sadness. This is what it looks like. I know it will pass. And when we are feeling these big feelings, that if we can just help take some of the scariness out of it for our kids, and that they're very seldom occasions in our lives where we are experiencing big feelings like that. But whilst they would see some of my grief bubble up on occasion, and on the occasions that they did, I would help them understand what I was experiencing. But predominantly, I did my grieving in private.
No matter how we try to hide it, our children will pick up on our feelings. So I think it's important to be real with them when we're struggling with something. But I also think we need to be careful to use these times as opportunities to teach them about emotions without overwhelming them. This is when we need to have a professional or support person to lean on ourselves. As parents, we are human, and sometimes when we're feeling anxious, we may snap at our children. I know I do. There's a beautiful concept called rupture and repair. Rupture and repair refers to the breaking and then restoring of connection with our children. As humans, we're wired for connection, and connection is what researchers say bring the most happiness. Now, this isn't an excuse for abusive behavior. Rather, in the nitty-gritty of life, when we don't handle something well, it's in the way that we apologize and move forward differently in the future that can become an opportunity to strengthen our relationship with our teen. So perhaps if you're finding that you're exploding regularly, this might be a time when you seek help for yourself, because there's usually something happening underneath that you might need support with.
I was able to let them in a little bit, let them in on the process and see that it's okay to experience what you're feeling and to notice it and to name it, to sit with it, to cry it out. And that in those moments that what I would look to do were things like spending time with our dog, or just having a cuddle, one of the kids would come and just give me a hug and just sort of say, I'm really sorry that you're going through this, and modeling the things I've said to them when they've experienced big challenges themselves. So I'd let the door open a little bit, but then be very mindful that the bulk of what I was experiencing wasn't something that I wanted them to be a part of. Other times it could be really something small, like when we live on acreage and sometimes there's a dead animal on the property, and I might go out to let the chickens out in the morning, and sometimes there's just a dead possum, and it's like this bizarre thing, like it's just dropped from the sky and you have no idea why it's there. And I might have to come back inside to get a glove to deal with the animal. And the expression on my face probably says it all. And they're used to this sort of thing happening. I'll say, oh, well, I've just found a possum outside that's, that I'm going to need to get rid of. Pete would normally kind of deal with that. And I'll say, it's not something I enjoy, but it's something that I just have to face up to. It's making me feel a bit, but I'm going to turn around and face it. And that's just me saying, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm feeling like this. This is how I feel about it. I'm just going to get on with it. So we can do that for our own feelings and this kind of coping out loud. And sometimes I'll say, you know what, you might notice I'm feeling a bit anxious at the moment. I'm not really quite sure why. I'm just going to let you know if you see me sort of taking a few deep breaths or just taking a mindful moment, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm grounding myself so that I can refocus and get back on with what I need to do. So I guess I'm quite open and quite vocal around those sorts of things. Other times I won't say a thing, because doesn't need to be the whole family life that's exposed to everybody's, ups and downs as parents. So I pepper our family life with opportunities I think that will enable them to grow and learn. And when it comes to their experiences, I have developed a willingness to sit with my own distress as a product of their distress, and to be able to sit in their discomfort with them and enable them to express how they feel as well.
Okay. So you've given such beautiful pictures of how we can name our emotions and name what we're feeling and name those responses. And I think that teaches our children to begin to recognize what it looks like for somebody to be grossed out by the possum or feel anxious or whatever it might be, because often our children don't actually recognize those emotions in themselves and then don't know how to express what they're feeling. So those are just beautiful examples you've given. Then, Jodi, I just want to ask you also, how do our parents know then when is it time as an adult to seek help?
I like to say to parents that if you are wondering whether or not it's time to seek help, I think it's time to seek help. I think that's the first thing to say, is that there is no harm that can come from making an appointment with your GP, even if you go alone at the start. If your children are young, you can take your children with you, of course, but you might even just feel it at the first step to go and have a conversation with the GP, to have an opportunity to express what you've been observing and noticing, and to get a little bit of direction as to what to do next, what's the next step. And already you're feeling supported, because when we're struggling with our own mental health, or one of our children are struggling, it's really tough. And so support and starting to sort of build that professional support team is imperative. From a more symptomatic perspective, what we look for is when anxiety and symptoms are really frequent, extreme, and stopping you or one of your children from being able to do the normal things that really enrich their life, like going to their singing lesson, going and hanging out with friends, having a sleepover, going on camp, going to school, presenting in front of the class, which is anxiety provoking and challenging. But from the diagnostic point of view, it's really about frequency, extremity of the symptoms, and that real getting in the way of daily functioning, that avoidance when it's just really starting to come in and really stop them from living a rich and full life.
And so, Jodi, in your work with anxiety and around mental health, what is your hope for this field?
I have a number of hopes for young people and for this field. First and foremost, I would just dearly love for every person to develop over time a really great understanding of their brain and how their brain works, and how natural and normal and protective anxiety is, the role that it plays. It's really important. They're part of their brain that is responsible for looking out for cues of safety and danger, will immediately detect that threat. And I want young people to know that that's something to really listen to, and that's really protective. That's what we have anxiety for, to keep us safe. And so to help our young people go, right, this is really important. It's a normal human emotion. We don't need to be afraid of it. It's not dangerous. Sometimes not listening to it can be dangerous. So we need to know when to listen. When, our friends are all climbing into a building to steal something, okay, that's dangerous and that's a real big risk. So then we want to listen to that part of the brain that says, that's not a safe thing to do, and then pull back. Absolutely. But also to know when that part of the brain says, because they desperately want to work at the local frozen yogurt shop that sells burgers and fries and amazing frozen yogurt, right? But it means having a job interview. So when the brain says, oh, that's frightening, that's a threat, yes, the brain will detect that as a threat. But having that recognition that, yes, thank you, brain. Thank you for trying to keep me safe. Yeah. Thank you for holding me back because this feels a bit scary. But recognizing that sometimes the brain will detect a threat where really it's just about moving outside of our comfort zone. And having that understanding to know the difference, and also feeling really empowered to know that anxiety is going to show up around the things we really care about. They're just some of the things I really hope for, and for everybody to feel equipped to know that I can recognize anxiety when it's showing up. I can ground myself in this moment, settle my physiology, settle down these physical symptoms, but know that I can't get rid of it. I wouldn't want to, even if I could. It's important. We just have to sort of find a way to live with it and to really move forward and do everything that we really want to do, even if anxiety bubbles up and says, whoa, that's a big deal. We know when to settle it down and to move forward, even if it's sort of coming along for the ride with us.
I love the reminder in my chat with Jodi about the genetic factor in mental health, and that it's never too late or you're never too old to get support. If you're going through a period of stress, a relationship breakdown, a job loss, or a loss of a parent, even if you think you're doing okay, it might be good for you to go and chat with someone. Having regular mental health check-ins are so important for our overall health. You can also find me or leave a question for a future episode via email or my Facebook page or via raisingteens.au. Or you can go to the Hope 1032 podcast page. Please subscribe and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd love to see you next episode, and in the meantime, keep parenting with your teen's future adult in mind.
This episode was hosted by Collett Smart, edited and produced by Alec Green, imaging by Lucy Weil, and social media by Beth Rivers.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.